exist. In a TV First, we reveal the cutting-edge technology now used by British police to join the dots and reveal new evidence in all homicide investigations.
I'm Tim Tate. I've been an investigative journalist for almost 50 years.
I'm Sam Robbins and I'm a criminal intelligence analyst. For over 20 years, I've worked alongside detectives on major murder investigations.
Together in this new series, we are going to discover the fatal mistakes which prevented the perfect murder from ever being committed.
Many killers plan what they believe will be the perfect murder. Many killers go on to put that plan into action. Very few, though, try to commit the perfect murder on the same victim twice. Émile Sillier is the rare exception. Over the space of just a few days in spring 2015, Émile Sillier tried to kill his wife, Victoria, twice. But because she did live, Émile Sillier's double life as an abusive husband, a serial philanderer, a fraudster, and a would-be murderer rapidly unraveled.
This case continues to be of interest to the public because it's a sexy case. It has somebody from the military, it has good-looking people, it has sex, it has all sorts that makes it titillating for the public to listen to and to hear the details of, and they can't get enough of it. In my career, this was defining for me, to be honest. I was involved in that case for 3 years, and it was 3 years of long, hard work.
Émile Sillier stands out purely because of the person he was, purely because of the characteristic traits that he showed. So everything Émile did had to bring a benefit to Émile, whether that's financial, sexual. The extremes he went to achieve those ends, you rarely see in people.
Sam, Émile Sillier, what do we know about him?
So he originated from South Africa. He had a relationship with a very young girl, Nicoline, and she's only 13 at the time. She becomes pregnant at 16, so she's a very, very young mother. That was the start of a pattern, a repeating pattern of predatory behaviour by Sillier.
And he likes money, doesn't he?
He likes the really good things in life. I think he probably looked at himself as a bit of a James Bond figure. He liked all the latest gadgets, he was very keen on money and the finer things in life. And he liked that playboy lifestyle of having multiple relationships, despite the fact that he marries some of the females that he's in relationships with, he has children. When he bores of those responsibilities, he just moves on. So Émile Sillier's is all about Émile Sillier's.
What you're describing are psychopathic traits.
Definitely some psychopathic traits in there, and the trait that really comes out in all of his behaviours in this case is narcissism.
So people like Émile Sillier often have a collection of traits, we call them the dark triad. So there's psychopathy, Machiavellianism and narcissism, and certainly Émile Sillier had elements of all those three traits. They sort of link together largely through this sort of common aim of manipulation. But again, this general disregard for other people, the feelings, and an inability really to connect emotionally with people.
Every action that Émile takes is all about furthering his own wants and needs and exerting power and control over those around him.
So his first major relationship, he fathers 2 children with her.
He does, but he doesn't hang around very long. He moves to the UK. So he essentially abandons his pregnant girlfriend, and then when he's in the UK, she gives birth to his son.
Emile Cilliers really sees other people as something that he can use for his own gains. Very quick then to move on as soon as he finds something new, or the parts of his life are not unfolding as he wished them to, and he will manipulate and con people in various situations.
In his late teens, early 20s, he'd moved to the UK. He'd worked a number of casual jobs before settling down in Ipswich in Suffolk, where he'd met Carly Cilliers, who he subsequently married and had children with.
He forms a relationship with a lady called Carly, who he marries, and then goes on to have 2 more children.
Whilst he was with her, he joined the army. Being a South African national, he was allowed to, and from there he initially joined the Royal Artillery, who were based in Larkhill, just outside Salisbury. From working with them, he gravitated more towards the PTI side of it, and on getting promotion, he joined the Royal Army Physical Training Corps as a sergeant.
Narcissistic individuals seek out occupations, or they'll pretend to be from occupations that exert authority and control. And what's quite interesting with Emile Cilliers is that he joins the army. It's all the things that would appeal to his narcissistic characteristics, and he becomes a skier for the army. He's going on lots of skiing expeditions and becomes really very proficient until he has a very serious skiing accident.
Being married to someone like that can't be easy.
No, absolutely. And actually, it leads to a breakdown of the marriage from Carly, and Emile and Carly separate. But he has to have physiotherapy as part of his recovery, and he meets Victoria, who is his physiotherapist. She is going through a divorce from a very tricky marriage, a fairly abusive marriage that she was in. So she's a vulnerable individual. It's at a time when Emile is essentially looking for his next fix and high and next victim in terms of female relationships.
So he's on the hunt.
Absolutely. And I think what is really clear from the whole of the timeline is that he's got very predatory behaviour.
She was a captain in the army before leaving and joining the MOD as a physiotherapist, and I think he saw her as a way to making himself appear higher up in the echelons, if you like, than he actually was, and he could use her and her connections in order to do this. So in the first few months they were very much in love. He would love bomb Victoria. He would make her feel like the best thing in the world and like he couldn't live without her.
He fastens on to Victoria. What need is he meeting for her?
What Emile is excellent at, as are all narcissists, is being able to look at a situation and mirror back the behaviours that they want someone else to see in them. So he knows and he spots very quickly that Victoria is vulnerable. So he starts to inhabit all the behaviours that are going to be needed to win her over. And it's a term called love bombing. And when you see that very, very early on, when it comes very quickly and it's hard and fast, it really is a massive red flag that you've potentially got a problem, because someone's trying so hard to win you over.
And if you're Victoria, it's very hard to spot that, isn't it?
There is no quicker way to fall in love than thinking that you're falling in love with someone who's got your values and your best interests at heart.
It's not just values, though, is it? Victoria's hobby becomes part of Emile's life.
Yes.
So Victoria's hobby was skydiving. In fact, it was more than a hobby, it was a way of life for her. She was a free-fall skydive instructor, and she'd done over 2,500 jumps. So she was extremely experienced and very, very well respected in the parachuting world.
Cilliers trained as a packer, someone who is qualified to pack the main parachutes and also the reserve chutes, which are sometimes deployed if the main canopy doesn't open or malfunctions. And by 2013 he'd got full qualifications on both and was earning extra pay as a packer. Meanwhile, back at home, Victoria has given birth to their daughter.
Yes.
Her first child,
Yes.
Emil's fifth.
Yes.
What's he doing around this time?
So he's certainly not being the loving, attention-giving father that he should be. So that love bombing of Victoria, in order to win her over, has done exactly what Emil wants it to do. It's got her into a position where she's married him and she's had a child with him. He, on the other hand, is carrying on like he always does.
So from the surface, everything looked almost picture perfect, but behind that you had a wife that was ignored. He'd spend many nights away. He would go to swinging parties. He would try and coerce Victoria into going to swinging parties. Women he met there, he would meet subsequently at weekends. He was on the various dating apps. So he was constantly looking for sexual partners whilst married.
Financially, how's the family doing?
Not brilliantly. So Emil is also, in order to chase the highs that he so desperately needs, is gambling, and he's starting to spend the family money, and also his playboy lifestyle. He always wants the finest things. It's not necessarily about getting the finest things for his small family. It's about feeding himself. So the money starts to decrease, and to the point where he starts to lie to Victoria about what he needs funds for. I think first of all, one was to fund an operation for his father, and then he starts to steal money from Victoria.
He steals money from his own wife.
He does.
I don't know whether she knew where it was going, because they would never discuss this. He would never allow that conversation to happen. But she did challenge him on why money went from her account. And there was one point, I think it was £6,000 went from account in three 2,000 lump sums. And he just gave her some cock and bull story about it was a bank's fault, it was this fault, it was everyone else's fault. And when she dug down into it, she realised the money had gone from her account to his account using their own sort of home computers, etc., the IP addresses of those.
Emil blamed the bank for their incompetence, and he said, "Do you think I'm stupid? This is all your fault. You're mad. This is nothing to do with me. You're paranoid." And he made her think that it couldn't possibly have been him, and it was all down to her insecurity.
Emile Cilliers subjected Victoria to what psychologists term coercive control. He would criticize her viciously one minute and then praise her like a princess the next. It meant she never knew which Emile Cilliers she was going to get.
Coercive control is nothing to do with gender, class, age. It goes across everything. It's not the obvious broken arm, black eye violence, but that subtle coercive control where they lose control of their freedom, their confidence, their finances, so they become effectively a shell of themselves. They're shut away from their friends and their family, and they're just there to serve a person.
We fast forward not very far to November 2014 on your timeline. Victoria's pregnant with their second child.
Yes.
But Emil is not being any more faithful.
No, he's not. And he is now regained enough fitness to be back skiing with the army. So he goes on a 1-month skiing course to Austria, and he meets Stephanie, and he starts to have an affair with her. And this particular relationship will be critical in the undoing of Emile Cilliers.
So Emil had met a lady called Steph Goller. She became his new infatuation. Victoria had her suspicions. She certainly at times thought something was going on, but he denied it, always denied it, and would put the blame back on her, that she was paranoid and ridiculous. But did she ever think he would go as far as to try and kill her? No, absolutely not.
This is just a continuation of his narcissism. He started another relationship and he wanted to be with her. He told a load of lies to start this new relationship by saying he was single, etc. And the only way he could see out of it, if you got rid of Vicky, get rid of the children, pick up the life insurance, he could start afresh.
Emile Cilliers was different to a lot of men who commit murder, because for him, he didn't want to be necessarily actively involved in that murder, as in face to face. It needed to be from a distance so that he could distance himself from it, and he didn't feel, therefore, perhaps that he was part of it. I think once the decision was made, Emile Cilliers would have stopped at nothing. He needed to move on, and to move on, he needed to get rid of Victoria.
So he plans what he thinks is going to be a perfect murder.
And what Emile had done is he'd taken a room at the barracks at Aldershot. So on Sunday night he used to leave home and go to the barracks, saying it was too difficult to drive on a Monday morning. Essentially he used it as a place he could take other women back to. So on that Sunday what he did was he put the children to bed early, had dinner, put Vicky to bed. She went to bed about 10. He then went downstairs into the kitchen. He loosened the gas valve, so I had a gas hob in the brand new kitchen with an emergency cut-off, as they all have now. And he loosened the nut on that to allow gas to seep into the kitchen, and he left and went straight to the barracks overnight.
In the process of loosening the knob, Cilliers grazed his knuckle. He didn't notice, but there was a tiny smear of blood. He then got in his car. He didn't drive straight to the barracks. En route, he stopped to have sex with his ex-wife Carly, and then arrived at the barracks and texted love messages to Stephanie Colley, all the while knowing that the gas was building up in the kitchen, and that when Victoria switched on the gas hob, she and their 2 children would be blown to bits.
He was prepared to try and blow up the house with the gas leak whilst his children were there. You know, I get marriages, relationships fail. I get, rightly or wrongly, that people then end up in some sort of violent confrontation with each other. But how rarely do you see people that are willing to allow their children to be collateral damage and be killed?
Even amongst lots of criminals, that would be seen as quite extreme, but he doesn't have this conscience, in a sense, that if he gets away with it, then it won't matter to him. He won't feel bad. The only real consequences that he wants to avoid is being caught.
Victoria became aware when she came down the stairs on a Monday morning that there was a smell of gas in the kitchen. So when she smelt gas, she messaged Emile and said, "Do you know anything about this?"
And he said to her, "Have you put the stove on?" And she replied immediately, "Well, I'd rather not, obviously." He didn't come home at that time. He just left her to sort it out. So she actually called out another gas engineer who came and found the loose nut and tightened it up.
Victoria's suspicion is already building that all is not well here. So she sends him a sort of jokey text saying, "Are you trying to kill us?" Which he reacts very badly to, and obviously does what he does in every situation where he's being caught out. He tries gaslighting her in terms of making her think she's going crazy. He loves them. Why would, don't be ridiculous. Why would I do such a thing? But by this point, Victoria's suspicions have definitely raised to the point where she thinks she needs to take some kind of protective action.
And she does, doesn't she? She takes action to protect her family's finances.
She does. Unbeknown to Emile, she actually writes him out of her will. That is a really strong course of action, to write your loving husband out of a will should you lose your life.
We know he doesn't know about this because he takes his own action.
He does. So one thing that you'll always look for when you're looking at a murder inquiry is, has any suspicious activity taken place prior to the incident being discovered? So one thing that the police would always look for is, have any insurance policies been taken out? And lo and behold, in this case, police find that an insurance policy for £120,000 has been taken out on Victoria's life by Emile.
We're now coming to April 2015. Everything's coming to a head.
Yes, his first attempt has failed. So within days, he's hatched another plan, which possibly was, when you look back to 2012, so almost 3 years earlier, did he always have this in his mind that he could manipulate conditions to the point where he could encourage Victoria to jump out of an aeroplane?
So Victoria and Emile already had a 3-year-old child, and Victoria had just had a baby 5 weeks prior. She obviously hadn't been jumping since she found out she was pregnant, and Emile, 5 days after the gas leak, said to her, "Why don't you go and jump this weekend? It would be lovely for you to get back into it again." Victoria, thinking she had the old Emile back again, jumped at the chance and said, "Yes, I'd love to."
She was now capable of jumping, but with 2 young children, she was a little bit dubious about, is this a sport I want to get back into? Would I still have the same love for it now I'm a mum of 2? So he convinced her to go. They would try it that weekend. So he came home, they packed up. Saturday morning they shot up there. Now this is April, May time, so skydiving is very weather dependent. It has to be clear, they don't jump through clouds, etc. So if it's any of that, then there's no jumping.
Emile had taken a parachute out for her from the parachute centre. He had rented it for her because her own parachute was in for repairs.
So that was given to him. He puts it on his shoulder. She finishes paperwork, comes over and joins him. And the little girl says, "Mummy, I need to go for a wee-wee. I need to go to the toilet." So he says, "Don't worry, I'll take her." So he takes the little girl into the men's toilets, and he's there a number of minutes, 5+ minutes.
We believe that when he was in that toilet, we believe that that is when he tampered with the parachute.
She goes and listens at the door and hears some sort of jingling type noise. Difficult to describe, but sort of something in there that was a funny noise. But she comes back, and a minute or 2 later, Emile comes out with the little girl and the parachute on his shoulder. And they have a bit of chat. They didn't get told, "Look, it's too cloudy today, there's going to be no jumping."
But instead of putting the parachute back in the main store where all the parachutes are stored for the jumps, Emile ensures that it's placed into Victoria's locker at the airfield so that she will go and retrieve that exact parachute. So it's so calculating that he's ensuring every step of this plan. He's failed once to try and kill her. He's not going to make that mistake again, and he's going to ensure that she gets the parachute that's faulty this time.
Emile insisted that Victoria put it into their locker. This was really unusual, but Victoria didn't want to make a fuss. The children needed to get home, they needed to be fed. So she agreed, and they put that parachute that he had rented for her into their locker overnight.
He would have really taken some pleasure in trying to create some kind of situation that was indicative of his narcissistic beliefs. It reflects very much on his personality. There were probably less audacious, conspicuous ways in which he could have killed his wife if he really wanted to, but it really reflected on him as a person that he wanted to do it in this very almost flamboyant way.
The next morning, on the Sunday, the weather had lifted slightly and Victoria went to Netheravon airfield on her own. She drove herself.
At this point she's still expressing milk, breastfeeding, so there's some text conversations about, this is, it's quite difficult to find a private space, and I feel awkward, and I've got to store the milk, so I might just come home, she says. And he said, no, don't come home, stay there, it'll be great, you'll enjoy it, jump twice if you can.
Yet again, it was bad weather throughout the day, but at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they said that they could jump, but they would only go up to 4,000 feet as the cloud cover was very low. It was going to be a jump called a hop and pop, which meant that almost as soon as you come out the plane, you pull your parachute, so there's very little free fall.
So she said she was always nervous, but she put that down to, look, I haven't jumped for months, mum of 2, I've got some concerns. But other than that, the parachute looked fine, there was nothing untoward about it visually.
One by one, the divers jumped, and she watched as their canopies opened and they floated down towards the ground. And then she launched herself out of the plane.
After Victoria left the plane, she was at 4,000 feet. Almost instantly she pulled the handle to engage her main parachute. But to her horror, when she looked up, she could see that the lines were twisted.
When you deploy, you look up and there should be like a rectangle of material above your head. Visually demonstrates that it's deployed correctly and you can fly it. And she realises straight away something's wrong. It's not a rectangular material and she can't use it.
Victoria was both highly experienced and highly trained. She knew what to do in these circumstances. She'd been trained to cut away the main malfunctioning chute
and pull the cord for the reserve chute, which would get her safely to ground.
When you cut away a main parachute, the reserve comes out almost instantly. You can pull it manually, but it does come out as an automatic response. However, when her reserve parachute opened, she realised that only half of it was attached. On one side, the slinks, which are a key component of the parachute, were missing, and her parachute was no longer attached on one side.
So now she's not flying at all, but it's put her into a spiral. And what she says is, I don't really ever look down, I don't really ever start to panic, I just spend my time trying to correct it, trying to fly it. You know, training kicks in and I try and get on with it.
During the fall, Victoria was conscious of fighting all the way, and she will say she fought with everything, all the way down. This was her life. She thought about her children, she thought about them being left without a mother, but ultimately she fought to stay alive.
Spectators watched in horror. They were convinced there was only going to be one outcome for this.
They have an open-top double-decker bus on the apron out the front. So someone stands at the top with a pair of binoculars, so straight away they put up an emergency call that they can see something is clearly wrong as she's descending. So straight away they go towards where she's heading, because she's now heading away from the hangar and away from the landing zone.
She is twisting in the air because of the spin of the parachute, and she lands about 10 to 15 feet from a road in a ploughed field, a freshly ploughed field.
By chance, that field had been recently ploughed, making the ground, the mud, softer for a landing, and frankly, Victoria had also been well trained in how to protect herself on difficult landings. And although she was horribly injured with a broken pelvis and spine and a huge number of other injuries, Victoria Cilliers was alive. Victoria was plunging 4,000 feet towards the ground at a rate of 60 miles an hour. And when she hit the ground, spectators watched in horror. No one could surely survive that. But Victoria did. Normally, you don't survive that. Piece of luck for Victoria.
It is genuinely miraculous that she survived this attempt on her life. And it was down to a couple of factors, really. One is that she was an incredibly experienced skydiver. So she did actually know what to do in an emergency situation. Not that she probably ever would have faced that in her life or ever witnessed anybody doing it. But she did know what to do, so she knew how to position her body in the best way to minimise injury. The other stroke of luck is that she happens to land on a freshly ploughed field. She miraculously survived. She is hideously injured with various broken bones and damage to internal organs, but she does survive, and amazingly she is conscious when the rescue team get out to her.
First person that raced to her was a Royal Marine who was up there that day. He had a body bag in his car actually, and he thought that's what they were going to use. When they get there, they find her sort of semi-conscious and groaning, against all the odds. They can't believe it. They then click into safety mode, first aid, call an air ambulance, etc.
Emile was called by one of the people working at the parachute centre. They advised of the accident and what had happened, and that she'd survived and was being taken to Southampton Hospital. Emile didn't say much at all. He was quite quiet on the phone for a little while, and then said, "I shall sort some childcare and I'll go down to the hospital."
And learning that she'd survived the accident, but it wouldn't necessarily have bothered him too much. It would have just been a little bit of an inconvenience, and he undoubtedly would have tried to do it again, because this was not something that he would have played on his emotions or any guilt or any worry about anything.
Another good example of his attitude was he was due to go and visit Victorian Hospital in Southampton. So he searched for a sex worker who lived in the vicinity of Southampton Hospital, so he could go there first before going to see his wife. Who would do that, you know? You're going to see your wife who's just fallen 4,000 feet. She's in intensive care in hospital, and yet you're more concerned with, can I have sex with a sex worker prior to going to see her? And that sort of, those little things like that really showed how selfish he was, how much he was concerned with himself above and beyond anyone else.
The chief instructor at Netheravon Airfield had been the first at the scene of Victoria lying on the ground. He had scooped up the parachute after Victoria had gone, but very quickly noticed that something was just not right about the parachute, and that he could see that certain aspects of the parachute was actually missing. So on the Monday, he called police. I happened to be working on CID at the time in Salisbury, and his call came through to the CID office. As I was almost the only officer that was working on that day, the call fell to me.
At that time, it wasn't a criminal investigation, it was a, let's scope this out, let's see what's happened, is there anything there? You know, we'll talk to Victoria, we'll talk to some people up there, we'll get the parachute examined, and then we'll assess it from there. So that was the initial phase of it, if you like.
So in terms of a forensic investigation, especially one which involves physical evidence, then that can provide clues in the terms of an investigation. So where we have a damaged parachute, then not only can we examine the damage itself, but we can potentially link that to a tool that may have been used to cause that damage. The DNA technology that we use today is very sensitive. It can recover DNA from a matter of a few cells. So it means that we can wipe a swab or apply a small piece of sticky tape to an area and speculatively recover the DNA of an individual.
The British Parachute Association had a look at the parachute, and they came back to us and said, look, we can find nothing wrong with the parachute, but we can't rule out someone manually interfering with it. So that was a massive red flag then, because if there had been a reasonable explanation, they would have found it.
This obviously led me to think, well, who else is involved? Who else could be involved with this? Netheravon Parachute Centre is a military base, which means that to get onto the base and onto the parachute centre, you have to have ID and you have to go through security to get there. So this narrowed down the amount of people who could have been involved quite quickly. We started to look at the last people who had been anywhere near that parachute. And of course, Emile Cilliers was one of the last people to touch that parachute. So we were interested in him, no more than that initially.
At the same time as that came in, we were approached by a very good friend of Victoria's.
After hearing about this incident, her friends, one in particular, decides that they really ought to let the police know that all wasn't well in the marriage.
I took that call, and that call was to change everything. Victoria's friend, who was also a captain in the army, said that she was not happy with the situation, that Emile and Victoria did not have the happy marriage that outwardly they appeared to. She said she'd seen so much about him that made her very suspicious about his actions on that day. She actually said that if he had been anywhere near the parachute, then she would be concerned that he was involved.
At that point, Emile does need to be spoken to. You could just treat him as a witness, or you could treat him as a suspect. The benefits sometimes of treating people as a suspect is you get powers of search off the back of that, of their house, of their workplace, etc. As a person in charge of that investigation, my gut feeling was I wanted him arrested, I wanted that sort of control, and I wanted the powers of search. So I made the decision at that point we would arrest him and interview him.
From what you've found and laid out, Emile Cilliers' reaction to being arrested and questioned is revealing, isn't it?
It's so revealing. So when police do decide that they're going to go and arrest him, he's actually at work. So he's a physical trainer for the army by this point, and he is furious that police have dared to arrest him in front of his subordinates.
Because he's losing face.
Because he's losing face and also losing control. And one thing Emile Cilliers hates is to lose control of a situation.
when a prisoner is booked in, they're always given the opportunity of a solicitor. Emil, however, said, I don't need a solicitor. I'm happy to go to interview right now. So we went to interview, thinking that he would say no comment, because that's something that's very common as well. But not Emil. He wanted to talk, and he wanted to tell us everything. And he talked for 6 hours.
And he says things, I'm a good father to my children, but I know I'm a bad husband. I don't love Vicky. I want to be away from Vicky. I want to leave her. I'm in love with Steph. I want my life to be with her. And he talks about his relationships with other women, both at swinging parties and with sex workers. It's almost as if he's trying to include you in it and be a bit, lads together. You're police, I'm military. We all know what it's like. But it's such an extreme version of what he's doing. This is just putting up loads of red flags.
When you consider he'd been arrested for attempting to murder his wife, most people would be nervous. The first thing they would do would be to protest their innocence and say, I don't know why you think this has happened. But not Emil. At no time did he protest with any urgency that he had not tried to kill his wife.
At no point do I think it ever occurs to Emil Cilliers that he's going to be outfoxed by the police.
He thought he was cleverer than that.
Yes, absolutely. I think he thinks that they're not going to be able to unpick this one.
He thinks he's got away with a perfect murder.
Yes, absolutely.
Victoria's at home, so she's been in hospital for 2 weeks or so. We sat her down, I explained to her about he'd denied maternity of his little boy that he had, and he was having a infatuation with another female, but I wouldn't tell her who it was, and that he wanted to leave her. I said, but these things cause me grave concern, and that I can't allow him to be here with you, because I've got a duty of care to yourself, also a duty of care to other females, a duty of care to investigate this now, because if he has done this, you're at risk. And at that moment, she just broke down completely. I think that was probably the first time when she faced up to what her marriage and relationship had been all about. And then when we went to leave, that's when she said, well, just now you've told me that, you better know about the gas leak. So we had no knowledge of that at all until that point. So, absolute double whammy. But after that, she very much closed down, and she would never accept that Emil was guilty, and she wanted us to stop the investigation.
In September 2016, Emil Cilliers was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder of his wife, Victoria. The case came to trial almost 2 years later, and even then, Cilliers might have got away with it.
When we get to court, Emil Cilliers turns up. He looks like he's dressed from Savile Row. He's in a 3-piece suit, he has a tie pin, and he is immaculate. Every day he's at court, he is immaculate. But he's also incredibly laid back.
And when he's there and he swans around court like he owns it, not a care in the world, he would sit in the dock at the back and he'd chew gum, looking bored, not really paying any attention to the evidence that was given, almost as if this is just pointless. I'm clearly innocent and I'll be walking out of here. Why are you wasting my time? And he never changed from that demeanour. There was one point where we were waiting for something, wondered where Emil was, and he was downstairs chatting up this young lady from another court hearing. Sat next to her on the public benches downstairs.
During the first trial, Victoria Cilliers was called to the stand to give her version of what had happened. As soon as she took to the stand, she started to go back on what she had told police. She said that she hadn't been given time to read her statement before being forced to sign it. She said that police hadn't kept her informed, and that in actual fact Emil had not spent as long in the toilets with the parachute as she initially claimed. She then also said that she thought she had cut away a good parachute.
And we're sitting there thinking, I don't understand, I get you weren't ever going to accuse Emil of anything, but I didn't understand why she spoke out against us so vociferously, and that did damage the case a lot.
In truth of it, I think Victoria, being a very, very smart woman, suddenly thought, what happens if Emil doesn't get convicted? He's going to be at liberty to harm me again.
He would try for a third time.
Yes, that he would try for a third time, so she wanted to appease that characteristic of his nature, to say, I'm not against you, and actually this has all been a massive mistake, because I think she was genuinely frightened.
We had a clinical psychologist assess Emil Cilliers, and he assessed him as a narcissistic psychopath, and a very dangerous one at that. But Emil had an amazing hold over women, and they end up in this coercive and controlling relationship where they are just pawns in his game. Ultimately, the judge decided to declare her what's known as a hostile witness. This means that her video interviews would be played in full for the court and for the jury, and she could be then questioned about those videos.
The jury couldn't reach a verdict. It deadlocked, and after 2 of the jury members pleaded to be released from service because they were suffering from extreme stress, the whole jury was discharged and the trial was stopped. A new trial was started within a month.
In the first trial, we had tried to spare Victoria's blushes, but for the second trial, the jury needed to know what sort of man Emil Cilliers really was. We had not brought in the fact that Emil Cilliers visited sex workers, he visited swinging parties. He was a really unpleasant individual, but we had to bring all this in because the jury had to know.
I was allowed to give evidence, and I was asked about coercive control. So I explained about how police try and deal with coercive control, how domestic violence isn't just about black eyes and the obvious, it's more subtle and it's a lot more insidious than that, and she was a victim of this. So when Vicky gave evidence, and she said the same thing the second time, there was a balance to it that the jury could see, and I think they understood her position then.
By the end of the second trial, we had done everything we possibly could. Thankfully, the jury saw through Emil, and he was found guilty. He showed no remorse at all. Even at sentencing, when the judge sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum of 18 years, he didn't bat an eyelid. There was absolutely no expression on his face whatsoever.
At the end of the second trial, it was 3 years since day one. You just wanted to jump up and down and scream and punch the air and say yes, but you have to retain that professional outlook and sit there and smile.
I was emotionally and physically exhausted. When that jury came up with the first word of guilty, I broke down. I broke down in tears. I just couldn't contain it any longer. This had been 3 years of hard graft, but we got where we needed to get. We had got a very, very dangerous man behind bars, and behind bars for a very long time.
It's nice to sit back and think you've had a really big case at the end of your career and you've actually brought it home and you've got a conviction from it. It's that's what you joined for originally. I joined to lock up bad people, and at the end of my career I got a chance to take on someone who was truly evil, truly horrible.
It would take a lot of work to try and rehabilitate somebody with those kind of personality traits. There's often some research that shows even sort of giving treatment to psychopaths actually makes them to some extent worse, as they actually can then learn the emotional ways to manipulate people. So whether he can be rehabilitated is really kind of a long-standing question that goes against lots of people of his type of personality.
In your analysis, what made the difference between his plan for a perfect murder and the conviction which proved it was an almost perfect murder?
He vastly underestimated the investigation team, who were dogged in their efforts to get evidence that would help secure a conviction. I think he underestimated Victoria. He must have been delighted when the first trial failed, But he underestimated the people that loved and supported Victoria, and he most certainly underestimated the investigation team.
The undoing of Emile Cilliers is a very interesting question. I would suggest his supreme confidence, the fact that he talked for 6 hours. He told us everything during that initial interview that he thought we would find on his phone, his computers, his laptop, but he gave us far too much information. And this was to his detriment, ultimately, when we were able to prove his lies.
Emile Cilliers may still proclaim himself to be a victim. He isn't. The real victims are Victoria, obviously, but beyond that, the 6 children Emile Cilliers fathered, and who have to grow up knowing that their dad was a would-be murderer. Their emotions, their needs, their psychological state often gets lost, and I wish more sensitivity was shown and more attention was paid to them.
Emile Cilliers must have thought, by tampering with her parachute, he was going to commit the perfect murder. Nobody would have suspected him. If she was dead and wasn't there to talk, that murder would have been perfect.